Why should we advocate? According to Alan Tuckett, if the world was perfectly ordered, the case for adult learning would be as well understood as the case for educating children. Until it is, governments need to consider the general interest needs to be balanced by civil society commitment to and arguments for adult learning. In this video, we are going to offer some communication-centered tactics to help make you become a better public advocate. Though they may seem small, our everyday communicative actions help change or reaffirm our social structures in many ways.
First, they are all based on the assumption that communication is constitutive. That is, when used correctly, they can produce the change we desire. Second, they value the fact that there is a complex balance in systems of power. They acknowledge that we are products of a culture that has defined who we are.
Third, they require a critical approach to understanding our world. They cause us to acknowledge that the world is not always as it seems. Finally, they require us to see and acknowledge the vast diversity all around us in order to help us align with other groups to generate social action.
Reflexivity is the careful process of analyzing the role each of us plays in systems of power and being accountable for our role in enabling oppression or preventing social change. By being reflexive and asking critical questions of ourselves and our actions, we can better comprehend and acknowledge disciplines in our culture. To combat racism, sexism, and other common everyday oppressions, we must take account of and show responsibility for what we see, think, and do. Here's a good example. According to an article in the American Journal of Public Health called "The Role of Public Health Advocacy in Achieving an Outright Ban on Commercial Tanning Beds," Australia has the strictest laws regarding underage use of tanning beds. Through reflexivity, we can ask why Australia has succeeded in this when so many other jurisdictions such as North America and Europe are still battling to see these restrictions put in place. We then can start to understand how there is not a strong collective advocacy body for the tanning bed industry in Australia, unlike in North America and Europe.
This is a very simple and often underestimated way of building understanding. For dialogue to be possible, we must see the other person or people we are communicating to as a subject, as a person with knowledge and equal to us. In order to effectively engage in dialogue, we must listen carefully to the other person as someone with important things to say, and be humble and generous. For example, according to an article called "The Importance of Advocacy" in Population Reports Journal, there was an advocacy campaign working to increase men's approval of modern contraception. The campaign sought to increase religious leaders' approval of contraception because their approval would strongly influence Jordanian men. To win their support, the Commission sponsored community meetings, provided information about family planning, and assuring the religious leaders that contraceptive use is safe and effective and in concordance with Islam. These meetings succeeded in motivating the leaders to discuss family health issues with their wives and to use health services. Participants agreed to return to their communities as advocates for family planning, creating a ripple effect that could reach as many as 50,000 people.
This involves thinking beyond the face value of any text, image, or moment to see what really lies beneath it. Critical literacy is a practice in its own right. It's a dedicated skill set that helps us analyze the illusions produced by specific groups to find the agendas that support them. For example, according to an article in Health Promotion Practice Journal called "Engaging Students in Community Health, a Public Advocacy Curriculum," health education for high school students often focuses on risk factors and disease outcomes and neglects teaching about the important underlying social, political, and economic factors that influence health. In these traditional health education approaches, students may assess personal cardiovascular disease risk by calculating their own body mass index and measuring portion sizes in light of their own dietary choices, or discuss the importance of personal bicycle helmet use to prevent head injury. By comparison, if we use critical literacy, we can engage the students to make their own responsible choices with their bodies by discussing the systematic forces that affect health, such as the proliferation of fast food and sweetened beverages, or the presence and enforcement of bicycle helmet laws. If we treat them as people who can make their own decisions, we may start to see better results.
This is often one of the most underestimated forms of advocacy. To be an effective advocate, you must not only listen to the content of a message, but also to the relationship message that comes with it. For example, in 1995, religious groups in the Philippines publicly attacked family planning as anti-child, anti-family, and anti-life. So to help make a better image for themselves, they listened to these protests and they developed an advocacy strategy to refute their criticism. The strategy focused on providing persuasive information about how family planning benefits children and families, demonstrating that family planning is in fact pro-child, pro-family, and pro-life.
This is about standing up against oppressors to show peaceful objections. It helps us move from being someone that is an object that is acted upon to becoming a person that acts. We all share the responsibility and duty to speak up by using powerful words, voices, and gestures to advocate with and for others to better the common good. Our use of speech has the power to ignite change. For example, in Jamaica, family planning clinics use billboards to advise people that they can avoid unintended pregnancies. For many programs in Jamaica, advocacy is a new responsibility. Programs that advocate family planning, however, encourage other supporters to speak up as well on these relatively new topics to their culture.
Here's another example. In an article called Challenging Messages About Advocacy and Public Relations by Eileen Pastor, she says, "The challenge of advocacy and public relations is particularly difficult because of the barrage of negative publicity about child abuse and neglect across so many jurisdictions and the social work community's frustration at often finding few allies." The Philadelphia discussion elicited several examples of compelling social advocacy and positive public relations that, if shared, could be replicated to provide a more accurate picture of the strength of the social work profession. They weren't afraid to stand up even though they knew they had a negative public image.
This involves us as communicators finding a common ground with other people or groups in order to help share a message. Finding common ground is a powerful way to bring about change for the future. By meeting people, finding out where they are, and learning from their own experiences, we can form strong alliances to help us better society and achieve a common goal. For example, in Turkey, 17 women's organizations developed an advocacy strategy based on networks of supporters and collaboration among organizations to promote equality for women. By joining together and adapting a common goal and theme, organizations had far more influence on policymakers than if each had made a case separately. As a coalition, they were able to obtain new government funding for contraceptive supplies, which helped compensate for the reduction of funding from the United States Agency for International Development.
In his book, Letters to Power, Public Advocacy Without Public Intellectuals, Samuel McCormick says that we should practice the rhetorical art of indirection between participation with dominating systems of power and solidarity with dominated political subjects.
We must use the power of these effective communication skills when we advocate for a public policy in order to achieve a greater good for our society.